The Douglas Coleman Show is made possible with support from Seth David Radwell, a recent guest on the program and author of American Schism, How the Two Enlightenments Hold the Secret to Healing Our Nation, released this past July. As Publishers Weekly writes in its recent glowing book life review of American Schism, business executive Radwell's epic debut examines the historical influences that have led to what he sees as the collapse of politics in the United States. Seth Radwell makes the case that the current chasm between the American right and left can be traced back to the 18th century's Age of Enlightenment and the basic tenets of liberty, equality, and reason. American Schism provides a historical perspective that can help us fight today's unreason with reason and bridge current-day divides. American Schism by Seth David Radwell is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold. For more information, go to AmericanSchismBook.com.
It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Jason Peterson. Hey, Jason, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it. So you are CEO of GoDigital. Is that the company?
That is correct.
This could be a really interesting conversation because I don't know what you know about me, but I've been a lifelong musician. And looking at your picture, I think I'm considerably older than you. So I've been in the music business for a long time.
It's just an old photo.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. Well, maybe.
No, I kid.
I still think you're younger than me. But be that as it may. So I've seen all of the changes happen through the industry. And you seem like you are pretty much an expert at the new music industry. I'm going to kind of rack your brain a little bit because I don't know how many old school musicians you get to talk to, but a lot of us are not overly joyed with digital. Some are, but a lot of us are not. I do see a line where the attitude toward digital and traditional music industry, which is no longer there, is directly proportionate to age. But anyways, tell me a little bit about what your company specifically does. You're not like a Spotify, are you?
No. So GoDigital Media Group is a holding company. We own, we have two primary divisions. We have a music division and we have a networks division. And we have a third burgeoning commerce division that's brand new. And so everything that we do thematically is in the IP rights management space. That's intellectual property rights management. And so in the music industry, we are a supplier to Spotify. We own and distribute and monetize music rights and provide them to users of music like Spotify.
Oh, you're more like a publisher.
We're a label, we're a distributor, we're a publisher. We perform all of those functions. We're completely vertically integrated. We have a global footprint in 16 different countries. We work with a lot of music from emerging markets. Over half our repertoire is Latin, popular Latin music, both reggaeton and regional Mexican.
Oh, okay. If I have music, I would come to you and you would essentially represent my music?
Correct. You know, you spoke a minute ago to the changing landscape in the music industry. And I've been in the industry a little over 20 years, so I've seen the change. I've been involved since the days of Napster and the Grokster and Morpheus litigation in front of the Supreme Court. I'm a lawyer by training, but really an entrepreneur by vocation. And like many people, I wanted to be a creative when I was a kid growing up, and I certainly have creative chops. I thought I would be a musician until a friend of mine named Joseph Green walked in one day. He'd heard Mark Cohn's Walking in Memphis on the radio. Great song, right? No vocals, heavy piano. And he sat down at the piano and played and sang the whole thing after hearing it once. And that was the day I went, well, I'll never be able to do that. So maybe he'll need somebody to handle his business. And I've made a career handling the business side of things for creative people.
It's a funny story, and I'll just tell you a quick sort of comparative story to that. A friend of mine and also my producer, his name's Stuart Epps, and he started out as an office boy at Dick James Music, which was the publisher for the Beatles. And one day this kid walked in and started playing on the piano, and it was the same thing because Stuart wanted to be a musician. And when this kid walked in and started to play, he said, oh God, forget it. I'm not going to do it. So he ended up in being a recording engineer and then a music producer. Well, the kid who walked in the door was Reg Dwight, who became Elton John. So it's funny like that, how, you get this idea that, oh, well, I can play, I can do this. And then somebody comes along and you just go, okay, forget it. It hasn't happened to me yet, but I ventured off into all kinds of different areas. All right. So let's go back to this. How do you work with your clients? Do they have to be well established, or do you take unknowns, or how do you do that?
That's a great question. So let's talk about the changing landscape in the industry as a way of answering it.
Okay.
As the industry has changed, right, from a physical medium to a digital medium, it's done a number of things. Number one, it's created infinite shelf space, right? So everything ever produced is available on demand, and you have something like 60,000 releases a week now. At peak, a large tower records or warehouse could carry maybe 40,000 titles. So you have more titles released in a single week than an entire big box record store could have carried 20 years ago.
Right.
And so what that's done is it's created opportunities and challenges in the industry and a whole new class of players. And so what I'd like you and everybody who's listening to this to visualize is a normal distribution. We're all familiar with the normal curve. Every business has a life cycle. Every product has a life cycle. Every song has a life cycle. Every artist has a life cycle. And at different points in your life cycle, you need different types of partners. And what's happened in this infinite shelf space environment is companies like CD Baby and TuneCore and DistroKid have arisen that cater to people that are at the very inception of that normal curve. They're just getting started. And as a general rule, of course, there are some popular acts that also self-distribute, but anybody can self-distribute through one of these services, and it's cheap and easy. Then as you begin to become more popular and you show demonstrable traction in the market, you need a different type of partner who can help you finance your growth and provide you the global reach and expertise you need to market your product and your brand. And then at the very top of that normal distribution, you need perhaps the biggest, most global partners. It's something akin to if you were in Silicon Valley, the life cycle of a venture capital startup, right? When you have an idea, typically you do a friends and family funding round, build your minimum viable product, maybe get it in the market. If you can demonstrate traction, then maybe you'll do a Series A with some professional investors. And if you are able to get to a certain scale, then you could do a Series B with a private equity firm, a growth capital investor, and on from there. And if you're really successful, maybe you'll take the company public or sell it. And that's actually a really good analogy for artist life cycles. And we typically sit in that Series B and later bucket. So when an artist has already proven demonstrable traction in the market, we're there to pour more gasoline on the fire.
What is statistically good traction for an artist these days, and how do you gauge it? Is it strictly by YouTube views, streams, downloads, all of the above? Followers on Facebook?
Great question. We typically are looking at revenue generating capacity, which today is much more variable than it used to be, right? A CD was a much simpler medium of monetization. Today, a stream is not a stream is not a stream. They're worth different amounts depending on the platform you're on, the time of year, if it's an ad-supported platform, because there's seasonality to advertising rates, and the country of the people that are consuming the music. And so we are an expert at digging in and really understanding the financial picture of any given music asset or given music owner, whether it's an artist or a label or a publisher. And based on that, we can help them finance their business. And we have different units within our company for different types of finance and partnership with the rights holder. So if somebody just wants, if an artist or a label just wants to finance their business, they're not looking for any other sort of partnership, we recently acquired a company called Sound Royalties, which helps artists, writers, producers, labels, publishers finance their business. And that's it. It's purely a financial institution. They buy time-limited revenue streams in exchange for a lump sum of cash up front, which that producer or rights holder can then invest in their business. If an artist or a label or a publisher is looking for a marketing and distribution partnership, then our Cinq music unit, CINQ Music, has a distribution business just like Sony, Universal, or Warner, and we'll often do a deal with that supplier of music. Could be a distribution agreement. We'll often provide an advance under that against their future income, help them finance their business, and then we'll partner with them and market and distribute the content around the world. And then in some cases, the provider of music is looking for a closer partnership, and they want to actually enter into an ownership or a co-ownership situation. And so we'll either buy a portion or all of their content from them and market and distribute that around the world. So it really depends on the state of the music rights holder and what they're looking to do in their business, but we pretty much have a solution for anybody that's hit that point of traction in their career.
Okay, well, what is the point then? I mean, how do you gauge that?
Good question. So, at a minimum, if you're looking just to receive financing from Sound Royalties, they're doing deals as small as say $25,000. So, it could be someone who's only making, let's say, $5,000 or $10,000 a year from their music. Cinq Music, on the other hand, typically works with what I would call popular music or culturally significant music, right? We own T.I.'s catalog, and we own a 50% interest in Jason Derulo's catalog. We're involved with Janet Jackson and a whole bunch of a litany of other really popular artists. And, so we're looking more for artists that are getting tens to hundreds of millions of streams, every month or every quarter, depending on the time period you're looking at around the world. And so, if you're not in the millions of streams space, we wouldn't consider it a validated repeating and scaling business model.
All right. Do you think streaming has cheapened the product from what it used to be before streaming?
In short, from a purely financial or statistical standpoint, yes. There's been a long-term trend of the average revenue per user, in other words, listener, in the music industry, going down on a real basis. That means on an inflation-adjusted basis, the price of music has been dropping for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And not too many people know that, even in the industry, because it's being obfuscated by the fact that there's so much subscriber growth. It's offsetting the fact that the price of music has been dropping on an inflation-adjusted basis. And what will happen, and we as a music industry need to start paying attention to this, is that once streaming matures, and we still have a ways to go, but once streaming matures, we will start to see price erosion in the market. And so as an industry, we need to do everything we can to uphold the value of music and to increase the pie for all participants.
Well, I hope so, because I always felt like as this thing progressed, starting from, like you said, Napster and the first platforms. I was on a platform called mp3.com. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. I don't think it's
remember it.
There anymore. Okay. Alanis Morissette was one of the investors in that, and I think she sold her share a long time ago. But that one was one of the first ones that started to pay the artists for streams. And then I think something happened and somebody hacked it, and so they shut down the pay situation. But it was a good introduction for me to see how this thing was going to come about. But already in my head at that point, I was making this comparison that, okay, well, basically 100 streams equals one download in terms of money to the artist. And I realized at that point that it was tilted against the artist, because no matter how much I like a song, I'm not sure that I've ever played it 100 times. Maybe in my lifetime, one or two particular songs got played 100 times. My point is that the consumer, if they like a song, they downloaded it for $1. They could play it once and delete it, or they could play it a million times. The artist still got paid the same amount of money. But with the streams, it was dependent on how many streams they got and how many times it got played. And that was where I found it to be sort of unfair to the artist.
So there are pros and cons, and I can outline them quickly. The pro to streaming is that it creates an annuity, meaning we have the opportunity to monetize the user engagement over time, ostensibly for the life of each consumer. And that changes the character of music to be, again, more like an annuity or a fixed income instrument like a bond. And that's actually a really great thing from a financial standpoint. But it changes the character of the income from being all up front to being in smaller amounts over long periods of time. Secondly, the con is that you're correct, again, going back to the value of music and the mirage of growth that I alluded to earlier, the real inflation-adjusted price of music has been dropping for over 20 years. The size of the music industry today should be double what it is if we were, in fact, keeping up with inflation. So there's this offsetting effect of music has become like a utility at the internet or cable TV, and everybody's buying it. And so you're going to have billions of consumers paying into the system, $10, whatever the local currency equivalent of that on a purchasing power parity basis is per month. And we're only at about 500 million paying stream subscribers, premium music subscribers today. So there's a lot of headroom. And we like to look at cable TV subscription rates as a proxy for what market maturity will look like. And there is a huge amount of growth still in front of us for the next 10 years, call it, in the number of people joining the market. So that will partially offset the fact that the average per stream rate, depending on the platform in the Western world, is somewhere between $1 per 1,000 streams and $6 per 1,000 streams. $1 being on YouTube and the $6 being on Apple. Spotify is around $3. And my view is that's not enough to begin with. 6 is an okay number, but anything less than that, I think, is not nearly enough. And because they're substitutors, we as an industry need to change things. Stream needs to be a stream, needs to be a stream. Whether it's on Apple, Pandora, YouTube, Spotify, doesn't matter. And I would submit the industry needs to start engaging in essentially a $6 per 1,000 stream wholesale rate. Charge every platform the same thing, just like you would wholesale a CD. We've somehow gotten to these revenue sharing arrangements with these platforms where we're sharing the risk with them, but we're not sharing the reward, right? Like we don't own any of YouTube. We don't get a part of Google or YouTube's market capitalization. We don't participate in the lifetime value of a customer on Amazon or an Apple customer, which is worth thousands of dollars.
Right.
Net present value to Apple. But we're driving those people to, be consumers on Amazon or Apple customers. And we're doing it on a revenue share. So the system is, on the one hand, broken and needs to be fixed. And on the other hand, there are huge opportunities because you have billions of people coming into streaming. And that's why you see billions of dollars coming into music right now from an investment standpoint.
You said broken. I was going to use the word rigged, but I get the point. The thing is that you said that there isn't a standard by which streaming is paid. And I would probably suspect, I can't prove this, but I would suspect that major label artists, and I'll just take Justin Bieber as an example, probably has a higher pay rate negotiated than somebody who's unknown who comes on there.
Let me speak to that because that is a really amazing topic to talk about. The short answer is yes. Participants with market power extract more value for the content. That's why, as an artist, it is to your benefit to be with a bigger player. I sit on the board of Merlin. Merlin is a collective bargaining organization that collects all of the major independent players and some of the minor independent players together, and we collectively bargain with platforms like Spotify. Now, it's very, very important that we talk about a feature that Spotify is trying to launch called Discovery Mode.
Called what?
They are telling the world, called Discovery Mode.
Discovery Mode, okay.
They're telling the world that this is a product feature on the Spotify platform that allows artists to acquire new fans and for new artists to get more exposure. And basically how it works is, if you have a playlist, say it's 10 songs, once you run off the end of the playlist, an algorithmic playlist starts to play of similar songs, and they'll program similar songs in there that are part of the Discovery Mode program. Also, if you start an artist radio channel or a song radio channel, they'll program songs into that algorithmic playlist that are participating in Discovery Mode. However, if you want to participate in Discovery Mode, you have to agree to take a reduction in royalties. It is essentially payola. You're paying to play. And we all know payola is illegal on the radio. And this actually is a very, very clever and insidious plan by Spotify to increase their margins and reduce the amount of money music rights holders make. Because here's what happens. What most people don't know, unless you're an executive in the business, is that all the distributors that provide music to Spotify do so on a revenue sharing arrangement. And so if you're a label and I'm a label, if you get more plays, you take money from me because we're in the same pool. It's a fraction, right? If there's only 2 players and there's $100 in the pool, you get your pro rata share based. If you have 40 plays out of 100 plays, you're going to get 40% of the pool. If I had 60 plays out of 100 plays, I'm going to get 60% of the pool. And if you enter into Discovery Mode and all of a sudden you're getting 80 out of 100 plays, but at a smaller pool, an artificially smaller pool, because they make you essentially pay them back, then not only have you taken money from me, the other label in the pool, or the other rights holder, the artist in the pool, but you've also given money back to Spotify and increased their margins. So it hurts all labels. It creates a prisoner's dilemma. If you don't participate in Discovery Mode, you may not be heard and seen as much, and you'll also get lower royalties because somebody else is going to participate in Discovery Mode, and they're going to get lower royalties too, but more exposure. So either way, you're in this prisoner's dilemma. You're going to get lower royalties either way, whether you participate or not. And so, I think we as an industry need to be very, very careful about these kinds of things. The platforms are super important. Independent music retail like Spotify is super important to the industry. But there is a tug of war between platforms and music rights creators and owners on how to divvy up the pie. And we all need to get aligned and focus on growing the pie and not just splitting up a smaller pie among us.
Well, I was happy to hear that you said that there was Merlin was collective bargaining for
correct
for streaming. Well, I'm happy to hear that. I never heard of them before that, so I'm happy there is some representation for artists.
Merlin represents about 14.5% of the music industry. We're roughly the same size as Warner Music, so as you can imagine, we get much better terms than any independent could get on their own.
Oh, yeah.
If that independent could even get a deal with the platform.
So is it like a real labor union in that sense that you would pay dues to join and be a member of?
They're, in a way, Merlin sits in the chain of title, so they are sort of like a super distributor, but you as the rights holder deliver your content directly and manage your marketing relationship directly with the platform. Merlin collects the income and then pays out all of its member labels and charges a very nominal fee. Relative to the size of the organization, the fee is extremely modest. And it's a great thing because you're right. If you're Universal, Sony, or Warner, you have market power and you're getting more from these platforms than somebody who doesn't have market power. And so Merlin, which has been around 13 years now, was a successful attempt by the independent community to create enough market power that we could negotiate on relatively even terms as the majors do.
How are they different from BMI or ASCAP?
So in the music industry, there's two, I guess there's really three sides if you include live, but there's two sides with regard to the music that we listen to on the radio or on a digital platform. There's the recorded music side, and there's what we call the music publishing side. And there's really two copyrights involved in music. There's the music composition, which are the notes and lyrics as we would read them on sheet music. That's what we call the music publishing industry. They represent those music compositions, commonly called songs. Those compositions can be recorded by one or more recording artists, right? Famous songs have been recorded by 100 different recording artists,
Sure.
sometimes more.
Yeah.
And the people who own those recordings are in the recorded music side of the business. And so to your question, ASCAP and BMI are collective bargaining organizations. We call them performing rights organizations that collectively bargain for songwriters and publishers with regard to the public performance of their music compositions. So it's in the publishing industry side of the business as differentiated from the recorded music side. Both the compositions and the recordings are separate copyrights, and in the United States, copyrights have 5 exclusive rights: the right to reproduce, distribute, publicly perform, publicly display, and make works derivative of the original. And so with regard to public performance of the composition, ASCAP and BMI collectively bargain and collect money for those uses.
Is there any... I played in bands way back when, long before the internet. And a lot of bands did cover songs in bars. We never paid any rights to anybody to... Were we breaking the law technically by singing a Beatles tune in a bar somewhere?
Well, in theory, that venue is supposed to have a public performance license with the relevant performing rights organizations in the country in which they are located. So in the U.S., ostensibly ASCAP, BMI, CSAC. Now there's GMR and a couple of other upstarts. And that would cover you for whatever, no pun intended, for whatever compositions you might perform live. Now, if you wanted to record those compositions, that's a different matter.
That's a different matter, yeah.
Involved.
Right, because I know there's a lot of people on YouTube who are doing covers of very famous songs, and whether they're, legit with it or not, I don't know. There's a lot of guys that are doing tutorials, like how to play this particular song. The Beatles seem to be the ones on there the most. I think I've seen at least a half a dozen people that are doing Beatles tutorial videos and Beatles copies and Beatles covers. And one thing I know from just from what I've been told is that the Beatles is probably the most expensive songs you could try to get a license for. Now, they don't need a license to perform it, right? But if they wanted to record it, actually, I think the license is if you just want to actually use the Beatles recording. Is that correct?
Well, again, there's the music composition and the recording.
It's different. It's two different things.
If you wanted to make a recording of the composition, there are certain licenses involved. So if you were just doing a straight cover recording that you were going to distribute as an audio-only product, then you might have to get what's called a mechanical license.
Mechanical license, right.
A license for the right to reproduce that music composition as it's embedded in your sound recording. If you're just streaming it, the digital platforms actually take care of that. They call it an ephemeral digital mechanical license, and they take care of paying it for you. And that's going to actually be through a thing called the MLC, the Music Licensing Collective, that was just set up recently in the last year and a half. If you want to do an audio-visual recording, that's yet another license, because now you're synchronizing that composition with the moving image, which falls under the derivation right of copyright. And that's where things start to get expensive, especially if it's a commercial use. But if it's on YouTube, YouTube specifically has created an ecosystem. They have a platform called the Content Management System, and they have a technology called Content ID that has allowed rights holders, like the publisher for the Beatles, to go in the YouTube system and see all of these uses that people upload. We were actually the very first partner. Our AdShare business unit, which is inside our music division, was the very first company identifying, tracking, and clearing uses of music on YouTube in January 2007. And I didn't know this until Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube, told me at the Wall Street Journal conference a few years ago. But if you, let's say, make a cover of the Beatles, it's a video, you put it on YouTube, the underlying rights holders have the opportunity to decide what policy they want to make against that video. So they could take it down or block it, or they could leave it up and decide to do nothing, or they could decide to monetize it. And if all the parties align on monetization, all the different parties that own rights, the underlying rights in the finished product, agree on monetization, then you'll see advertising, and the money will flow to each respective party based on essentially their fractional share of ownership.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Because I've actually spoke to a couple of the people who were doing these kinds of videos with the Beatles specifically. And I asked them, have you had any issues with copyrights? And they said no. So they have not been flagged, or they have not been notified, or they haven't been in any way contacted by anybody. So I don't know. I didn't ask them who's getting the monetization.
Yeah, chances are that if you see any advertising, that the professional copyright owners are making money on those videos.
Yeah, because they're getting a lot of hits. I mean, they're getting hundreds of thousands of views for these because they're very well done. And, I would think somebody would want that money, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, at some level, it's honestly not that much money. If you say, okay, YouTube's going to make me roughly $1 per 1,000 streams in the U.S.,
yeah, they're probably making
$100.
a few $100. I don't think that. Well, who owns the rights for that? It's Sony owns the publishing rights
TV.
for the Beatles, but Apple owns the mechanical rights, I believe. I think it's split up because Apple always seems to have its logo on everything visual for the Beatles.
I'm sure that I'm pretty sure Sony ATV is their worldwide administrator, especially since they bought EMI. But I'm sure there's nuances to the agreement that are not public.
Yeah. What I was going to ask you, and then we got to kind of wind this down. Do you know a guy named Ari Herstand?
I do not know.
Okay. He was on my show a while back. He wrote a book called The New Music Business, and he gave me an interesting statistic. Now, I don't know how old this is, but he said that there are over 7,000 music artists on Spotify who are actually making a living just on the streaming and having their music on playlists, which I thought was a pretty good figure, considering before all of this, I don't think there were 7,000 music artists out there making a living. I think most of us were starving and were working as a waiter or something else. So 7,000 seemed like a good figure, which kind of gave me a little bit of a positive uplift on streaming, because I was real down on streaming when it first started, because I just did that quick math in my head of 100 streams equals 1 download, and my opinion was never assuaged until I met and talked to Ari. So I didn't know if you knew him or not, but the book is pretty popular, I guess.
Spotify would tell you it's even more than that. I think they would say something like 50,000 artists and at least $50,000 a year, something like that. I think that's a good thing. I believe in the era of too much choice, where we have finite amounts of entertainment time and money that aren't changing very fast, that we're actually seeing in some ways a limit to humans' ability to make decisions and consume, and that actually leads, I think, to there's some more concentration that's actually happening. I don't have, this is just an oral conversation, so I don't have a charter in the show, but I would wager that the high side of the tail, if you will, has actually moved up, that there are less middle-class artists today than there were in the CD era, but there's probably more artists, there are more artists overall making money because, again, a big box music retailer could carry 40,000 titles. So if you were outside of that, you weren't really making money before, and now anybody can make some money, and it's a global economy. So like I said earlier, there's pros and cons. You can make some money. Anybody can make some money, but it's getting harder to make a lot of money.
Okay. Well, I think it was always hard to make a lot of money. You really had to get signed to a major label. There weren't indie artists back in the 70s that were making a lot of money, not that I know of, because it was impossible to get your music distributed. I mean, I knew guys that actually paid to have vinyl records pressed and were selling them out of the trunk of their car because the stores wouldn't take them unsolicited. You couldn't walk into Tower Records and say, here's a stack of records. You want to sell them for me? They would kick you out of the store. So, yes, the opportunities have been afforded to the artists. Like you said, anybody can upload a song and anybody can make a few pennies on streaming. But do you actually think the wealth disparity has increased with this? Yeah?
That's a good question. In short, I would say yes, although there are probably more musicians that are making tens of thousands of dollars than there used to be. But there's probably less musicians that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars to, call it $1 million or $2 million a year from their recordings. And then there's a few superstars, right, who make 5, 10, 15, $20 million a year from their recordings.
Well, okay, that's interesting. I think I'll kind of look on that and fool around with that concept, because the one thing that was interesting about the days of the vinyl albums is that there was less music out there. So if I went to, I was in high school in those days, so we would all get together and we could talk about the music that we were listening to, because we were all listening to the same thing. We all listened to the same radio station, because there was only a couple of FM stations that played rock and roll music. And we all had basically the same albums. So there was more, affinity with people, with their music. And there were only about a half a dozen genres. Well, now there's about 500,000 different genres and subgenres and sub-subgenres. And you'd be lucky to find somebody who was listening to the same thing you were, because there's just so much stuff out there. I suppose I could make the comparative of political divide and what has caused it. Well, it's all of this kind of technological divide that is just dividing us into little groups as a society. I mean, this is a topic for another show, because I think we would go on forever on that one.
I think that's a correct assessment, right? There's more choice than ever before, and relatively finite and a slowly changing amount of entertainment time and money. So, of course, there's going to be audience dispersion. We've not only seen it in music, we've seen it in video, like in TV ratings. And as a result, just to draw a comparison to television, we're in a golden era of TV. There is more good and interesting and high-quality TV programming now than probably at any point in American television history. And at the same time, it's a hits business. If you're not a hit, you're really nothing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's those hits that drive people to subscribe to services. So that's it's a challenging, it's a marketing challenge. It used to be easy. We had a guy named Phil Corderaro on our team who's run most of the major record companies at some point in his career, and helped Richard Branson get Virgin in the U.S., started Virgin Records. And he says that, right now in the music industry, there's not a whole lot of career development happening. It's about hit singles. And that's a different paradigm than it used to be. And in some ways, I think that's challenging, right? We're just using data as an industry to mine what's the popular trend, and we're trying to deliver what consumers want now without regard to developing and nurturing someone's career for a decades-long career. And hopefully that changes.
Yeah, on the other hand, I could argue that I haven't seen anybody come out yet that has that kind of staying capacity that somebody like an Elton John or the Beatles, or people that had lifelong careers, James Taylor. The ones that I'm seeing coming out now from the major labels seem to be flash, glam.
It's because of the paradigm I just described. Exactly.
A very computer-generated sounding song that is almost indistinguishable from another one. And, they get a bazillion hits, and you never hear from them again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
so that career artist development piece, I think, is really interesting right now.
Yeah.
You know, there's age and generational changes in music taste and consumption patterns. There's also more choices for how we spend our entertainment time and money than ever before, right? We didn't have 20 or 30 years ago
Oh, no.
smartphones and you know, social media. There's no Facebook, TikTok, whatever, Angry Birds, World of Warcraft, you know, League of Legends. None of this stuff existed, right?
It exploded.
Yeah. Now, music's a part of all of this stuff, right? Like, music is the soundtrack to our lives. You ever try to watch a movie without sound, and there's no emotional impact whatsoever. Same for games. So, you know, music is here to stay, and it's my favorite asset class, period. You know, I'd rather invest in music than I would real estate or stocks or bonds or commodities or anything else. I really, really believe that music streaming and music as an annuity is a powerful asset class. But it's not without challenges, right? And building artist careers is one of those.
Well, I hope you're right. I mean, I'm encouraged by what you're saying, and we do have to wrap this up. My guest is Jason Peterson, CEO of GoDigital Media Group. Do you have a website you want to give out?
Sure. You can find us at GoDigital.com. You can find me online on LinkedIn at USC Jason Peterson or Instagram.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for coming on. This was a lot of fun. Very interesting conversation. Very informative. I highly recommend all musicians listen to it. And I learned a few things. Maybe someone else will as well.
Thanks for spending some time. It's been fun. We'll do it soon.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Douglas Coleman's Don't Do a Podcast is a dryly humorous rant about Douglas's pet peeve, the unrelenting torrent of podcasts hitting the web on a constant basis. As technology has put podcasting within the reach of anyone, many wholly unqualified people have taken the plunge. This witty polemic tries to persuade them from broadcasting their drivel using Douglas's brand of sarcastic humor. Now on Amazon, only 99 cents.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Are you an independent musician? How would you like to have your songs played on hundreds of radio stations just like the one you're listening to right now? Join MusicSubmit.com and we'll promote your music to radio stations and blogs in your genre. It's free to set up your account, and we guarantee your music will be considered for airplay by radio stations worldwide. Why not sign up today? It's free. MusicSubmit.com. Radio promotion for indie musicians.
Hey, this is Ray Powers. Don't touch anything. You've got it right where you need it. Tuned in to the Douglas Coleman Show. You heard me.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Jake Kheel. Hi, Jake. How are you?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. So as we were talking about just before you got on, you're in the Dominican Republic at the moment?
That's right. I'm in the eastern part of the Dominican Republic in Punta Cana.
Is that near the Haiti border or the other side?
It's actually as far from the Haitian border as you can get and still be on the island. So we're
Okay.
closer to Puerto Rico than we are to Haiti in Punta Cana.
Did you have a big earthquake there as well? Because I know Haiti did.
Yeah, we didn't feel much. We do get some shakes occasionally, but this case we really didn't notice it.
I guess I have to ask the obvious question. What are you doing there?
So I work for Grupo Punta Cana, and it's a resort development community with a very unique history, deeply embedded in a commitment to sustainable development that has grown over the last 50 years. The company's now 52 years old, and I've been here for almost 17 years. And essentially, we are building out a resort community with all the basic infrastructure of a small city. So we have water treatment facility, drinking water facility, electric, security. We own and operate an international airport, a couple of hotel properties, and then private real estate properties. But it's all privately owned and run, which is quite unique in the development world. Usually the government or some subsidiary or some concessionaire of the government would run a lot of these public services, and the unique development of our region has led our company to be a private city in some ways.
Sustainability, that's something that I hear all the time, and I'm not quite sure what it means. I know it has something to do with eco-friendly and green, but why don't you explain what that means exactly?
Yeah, you're exactly right. There's a lot of definitions to it. There's kind of this constant changing of terminology. But we define it basically as trying to run a very successful business that takes into account the local environment and takes into account the local community and the local people. And that is especially relevant in tourism because the local people are one of your most important assets. That's who is welcoming your guests. That's who's providing services in the hotel, waiting on tables, meeting with clients, making sure they have a good time and great experience in the destination. And then the local environment. And in the case of Caribbean tourism, like the Dominican Republic, people come here in large measure because of our beautiful beaches and mountains and beautiful seas and coral reefs. And so a business like ours that's built on attracting people to see a place and ensuring that they have this amazing experience really needs to invest and think about those two assets, the people and the place. So we've been doing this for a long time, and there's a lot of innovation that goes into that. But we try and keep it pretty simple. There doesn't have to be too complicated. You got to take care of the local place, take care of the local people, but also make sure that you're running a profitable business.
So how big is the tourist industry in the Dominican Republic?
It is by far the most important aspect of the economy. Just in Punta Cana, pre-pandemic times, we have about 4 million arriving passengers a year through the Punta Cana International Airport, which as I said, we own and operate. The Dominican Republic, I think, is around 6 or 8 million tourists a year in normal times, and we're starting to get closer to that now as we start to see a recovery from COVID a little bit in the region. But it is an incredibly important part of the economy, and not just for hotel rooms. If you think about all the related benefits of tourism, you have agricultural production that gets consumed from the Dominican Republic and gets consumed right here in the Dominican Republic in the tourism, hospitality industry, construction, jobs, construction of new homes. You have foreign investment in the country, restaurants, associated businesses. So a huge percentage of the PIB or the GDP of the country is from tourism. It's a huge economic driver and incredibly important for the whole Caribbean region, but particularly in countries like the Dominican Republic.
So are most of the tourists that come there, are they American?
Our largest market is American in the Dominican Republic, North America, including Canada. And then we have a substantial market from Europe, Russia, and increasingly South America as well. So we're pretty diverse, but certainly North America is our most important market.
Okay. Now, see, I know very little about the Dominican Republic other than geographically that it's the other half of the island from Haiti. So the language is Spanish, I assume, right?
Yes. Yeah, and actually, the Dominican Republic is an incredibly unique place. It is has the highest mountains in the Caribbean, 2 highest peaks in the Caribbean, but it also has the lowest elevation in the Caribbean. So a lot of people will know Punta Cana and the coastal areas as these beautiful white sand beaches and turquoise seas. But what's really interesting about the DR is you have this amazing diversity of habitats. You have pine forests and rainforests and deserts and sand dunes and mangroves and all these really unique habitats. And it has a really pretty unique history as well. The Spanish colony set up here, so it's one of the oldest colonies in the Americas. The first university in the Western Hemisphere, the first hospital, the first church, and so it really has this amazing colonial history, and then also this really diverse, unique natural history. And so it makes it a really attractive place to visit. And the Spanish colonizers of the island, they really weren't rough on the folks that lived here. The Spanish colonizers sort of left, and so some of that remnant negative attitude in some of the islands of the Caribbean that have towards visitors or foreigners really hasn't stuck in the Dominican Republic. People are very friendly, very welcoming of international visitors, and really, it's a very warm culture, good food, really fun dancing, good fun music, and just a really nice place to live. I mean, I'm married to a Dominican, so I'm required to say that I love the place.
Yeah, I think that's mandatory.
That's right.
How long has it been an independent country then? Obviously a long time.
Yeah, actually, the Dominican independence came not from the Spanish crown, which basically left the island when they developed other priorities in the region in colonial times, and then it got its independence from Haiti after Haiti had become a free state, had liberated from slavery, and that's how the DR became a free country, democracy. But yeah, it's been a very stable country. Politically, it's been very stable over the years. Not a lot of the kind of unsteadiness that happens in Latin American countries. It's relatively safe, and because it's built on the tourism economy, it's obviously got a pretty diverse income from tourism, construction, development, and also agriculture and exports. So the economy is doing fairly well. Pre-pandemic, obviously the pandemic had a big impact on everyone, but it's a great place to live, and it's very open to having folks move here. Since the pandemic, we've had a huge number of folks that were using the Dominican Republic for second homes, and now have decided that it's a pretty good place to live year round. What's
the cost of living like there?
It's fairly reasonable. It's in the tourism area, it's obviously a little more expensive. In terms of construction costs and things like that. But in general, the cost of living is pretty manageable. I think less expensive than the United States, and certain benefits in terms of investments and things like that.
Okay, so for somebody looking for a place to retire, expats, is there a big expat community there?
Yeah, there is a growing expat community, and I think as the country, gets a little stronger in English language and gets kind of a longer trajectory of service industry and more diversity in terms of food and things like that, it really starts to strengthen it as a destination.
Okay.
For expats and for visitors. And I think one of the big elements that's really attractive, specifically to our place in Grupo Punta Cana, is this sort of long storied history in sustainability. What we're doing in terms of really investing in the local community, but also being innovative in terms of protecting local habitats like coral reefs, local endangered species, looking at solutions for waste, for solid waste like garbage, looking at ways to be really thrifty and thoughtful about our water resources. It's something our company has taken a lot of pride in, but it's also very useful as a marketing tool, because it's becoming a greater and greater concern for more of our visitors, especially people that are willing to invest down here and that want to move down here. They want to know, where's the garbage going? Where's the water coming from? How are they treating the local people? Is it safe? Is it stable? And things like that. So sustainability, from our point of view, is a key component to making this an attractive destination. And I talk a lot about that in my book.
Okay. What is the title of your book?
So my book is called Waking the Sleeping Giant. And it basically looks at this sort of largely untapped power of businesses to positively affect the planet, and not in the typical ways of companies that get into sustainability and just sort of get a certification and sign off, or they say we're going to go carbon neutral and, buy some offsets and, the basics, things that big companies do that are great. But it's really looking at solving problems for developing countries and using companies as a unique source of solution finding, of innovation, of capturing this great creativity that's housed within companies and applying it to some of the great challenges we're facing. As I mentioned, coral reefs, with the changing climate of our planet, with many of the impacts that humans have had on the ocean, from contamination with sediments, with nutrients flowing off into the oceans, we're really having this huge impact on these coral reef ecosystems, and they might possibly disappear in the future, in the not so far off future. And so our company has been investing a lot in restoring coral reefs, actually growing them in underwater nurseries, encouraging other businesses to do the same, creating a network of folks that are doing the work in the Dominican Republic, and really innovating new techniques for doing this work. We're years ahead, decades ahead of the Dominican government on this issue. And it's been a really important contribution in the Dominican Republic that's coming directly from the private sector. And I think we have a number of examples that are really unique, that show kind of companies, it's not just about doing less bad. Like, companies can really be these centers for innovation, for coming up with unique solutions to some of our major global environmental and social challenges.
Well, I'm no expert on coral, but what I have read is that it is extremely slow growing. It doesn't grow like corn at all. And it takes hundreds of years to create a coral reef. Is that correct?
In normal conditions, coral reefs take time to grow. There are definitely species of corals. A coral reef in the Dominican Republic can be made up of, a couple dozen different species. Some grow faster than others. Some grow deeper water than others. Some grow closer to the surface. What the work that we're doing is all about is protecting the corals that are in good shape in the water. So you don't ever want to have to do all this extra work of growing them if the coral's in good shape and you can protect them. And then the next piece of it is finding new techniques to grow corals in an accelerated way. So we have certain species of coral, like staghorn corals and elkhorn corals, that grow relatively quickly if you put them in ideal conditions. So we can grow them in underwater nurseries with good lighting and good water quality. They grow really fast, and then we can trim those corals just as if you were gardening, and then transplant them back onto the reef. And so there are now new techniques coming along to grow other species of coral in a much accelerated pace, whether on land-based nurseries, by assisted sexual reproduction, which is actually helping mix the genetic material of corals and transplanting that, and then also growing new species in underwater nurseries. And it's a science that's really taken off in the last 10 years or so, and we've been doing it for close to 17 years since I got here. So it's something that is a new science, in growing forest for reforestation. We've been doing that for a long time, so we're many generations ahead in terms of reforestation. So now coral restoration, we're really learning a lot of this in real time with these huge threats facing us, and trying to do as much as we can to protect these habitats as possible.
So I guess somebody might ask you, why do we need coral reefs? What is the purpose? What's the benefit?
Yeah, well, I'm a diver and I love being in the water. So the easy answer is they're amazing habitats. Like, if you ever get in the ocean and you see a coral reef and all these crazy, amazing species that live there, that's one perfectly reasonable reason. But if you live in the Caribbean, they also provide incredibly important services to the people that live here. So whether that's for fish that people can consume, whether it's protection services, the coral reef protects coastal infrastructure. So if I have a hotel or a house near the coast and I have a healthy coral reef, the impact of a hurricane or a storm or flooding is greatly reduced when I have a coral reef helping protect the coast. And there are many other services, for recreational activities, the economic benefit. The Dominican Republic, people that do snorkeling and scuba diving, it has a major impact economically for the region. And it also is the home to many species that actually produce the white sand beaches that we're selling in the Dominican Republic as part of a tourism activity. There are species of fish that grind up pieces of rock and coral, and their excrement is actually white sand. These are parrotfish. So the the economic value is what we really try and emphasize for the tourism industry. The coral reefs are not just these beautiful habitats and we should save them because they're this amazing place to visit and they have all these beautiful creatures. There is that, but they are also providing real economic value to tourism. And in the Caribbean region, it is incredibly important, these coral reefs. Most of the hotels in our region probably wouldn't exist if it weren't for the presence of coral reefs.
Well, it makes sense. They're almost like a nature's own break wall. Yeah, when you mentioned the hurricanes.
That's right.
Yeah,
incredibly important. And they protect the beaches from wave events and whatnot as well. So they protect beaches, they protect infrastructure. They're important economically for visitors, and also just amazing places to visit. It's really fun to get in the water and see fish.
Well, who knew that coral was so important, huh?
It really is, yeah, and highly threatened. These are habitats around the world that are at extreme risk from climate change, from pollution, from overfishing. There's all these impacts on coral reefs, and many of us, if you're not in this day to day, people kind of see it on Discovery Channel or National Geographic and think, wow, that's pretty sad. But for a lot of people, this is a very urgent matter that's going to make a big difference in their lives day to day, whether it's in the Pacific or the Caribbean, Australia. Lots of places depend on coral reefs for their livelihood.
Yeah, I don't think coral reefs get a lot of airtime and a lot of attention. I think people, when they start talking about the oceans, immediately go to the big plastic island.
Right.
That's the one that's getting all the attention, yeah?
Yeah, and we worry about things like that too. I mean, obviously, you want your beaches to be clean. If you're going to load it up with garbage, that's not super attractive for visitors. And it's also, a real issue for hotels and for businesses is what are we doing with all of this waste? Are we able to transform it into something better? Are we able to minimize the amount of waste that we produce? And that's one of the examples I talk about in the book quite a bit as well is, how do we as a company or as a destination, as Punta Cana, how do we come to terms with the huge volumes of waste that we produce? When people visit a hotel, they're eating at restaurants, they're eating at the buffet, they're going out, they're producing garbage. And even in our case, when passengers arrive to the international airport, they're leaving all the garbage they bring on the plane. So we have to deal with that as well. So we've had to come up with some really innovative strategies for separating the waste, for transforming organic waste into compost, into biogas and other materials, and really just looking at ways that our company can reduce our costs and produce as much benefit as possible by a really sound management of solid waste.
Jake, we do have to wrap this up. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Do you have a website, either a personal one or one for your book, one for your company?
I do. You can go to Jake Kheel, that's JakeKheel, that's .com, that's my website. And you can also check the book on Amazon. It's called Waking the Sleeping Giant, Unlocking the Hidden Power of Business to Save the Planet. And our work for Grupo Punta Cana and all of our sustainability matters is housed at puntacana.org. And we're active on all social media, Instagram particularly, for tourism, very important.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. I think I learned something today. I got my Coral 101 lesson, which is great. Always like to learn.
Well, terrific. Well, fantastic. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.